When the city was rediscovered in the 1700s, excavators found what could be the richest repository of ancient Western wisdom.
Experts have finally found a way to fix the unfixable after archaeologists used AI to repair 1,900-year-old art from Pompeii.
AI-powered robot is helping put back priceless artifacts together from shards and pieces that had been stored precisely so that one day technology would enable their restoration.
For nearly 2 millennia, these masterpieces were nothing but dust and tiny shards. Most people realize the eruption was bad, but they don't know the art died twice. After surviving the volcano, it was hit by bombs and left to rot. Basically, it was a lost cause until a new machine stepped in. The end result is going to change everything you know about Roman history. It is, hands down, the biggest breakthrough lately. Modern tech meets ancient ash. The work happens late at night in a place called the puzzle room. The motors of the machines are already running before the sun even comes up. Inside a building that used to be for servants, the room looks more like a small factory than an old dig site. There are tables, scanners, and monitors everywhere. In the middle of it all, a robot with 2 arms stands over a bed of broken plaster. On the table, every inch is covered with numbered fragments. You can see bright reds, deep yellows, and patches of white. Some of these pieces are no bigger than a coin, while others are about the size of a human hand. For decades, these pieces sat in storage boxes. They were seen as anonymous rubble from collapsed rooms. Now, they are in a different kind of line. Each fragment has already been scanned into a computer. The system knows exactly how thick it is and how much it weighs. It has stored every curve, color, and crack in a massive database. So, here is the deal with how the machine works. On a nearby monitor, a 3-dimensional model of one shard turns slowly. The AI has marked it with lines and points that might match other pieces. The robot lowers one arm, and its soft gripper closes around the old plaster. A person stands close by just in case the robot makes a mistake. Her job is to make sure the 1,900-year-old art doesn't break into even smaller bits. On the screen, the AI shows a fit it thinks will work. A faint outline shows where this shard might join a group of pieces, already on the table. A thin red paint stroke on the new fragment seems to continue across 2 others. It forms a curve that looks like a piece of clothing or a limb. It doesn't look like much at first, just paint and dirt. But this is the kind of detail human eyes struggle to see. When you have thousands of pieces, the brain gets tired. The machine does not. The arm moves slowly, and the fragment hovers over the cluster. The match isn't perfect the first time, so the robot lifts it and rotates it a few degrees. A meter on the screen shows how confident the AI is. A yellow light turns to green. When the shard finally settles, the full line appears. It is a curve that turns into the fold of a robe. Then, you can see the shape of a shoulder. When the software zooms out, it highlights a shape that has not been seen since ancient times. It is part of a person appearing out of a pile of trash. No one says the image is finished yet, and the machine isn't perfect. This is still a small test in a small room. But as more lines connect, it is clear the robot is doing more than just lifting rocks. It is making the first real picture out of damage that looked permanent. This art was once considered dead, but now it is finding a second life. The project is moving faster than anyone expected, and the results are starting to shock the world. Ancient walls turning into dust. Long before any robot was put into the room, the problem started with rooms that vanished in an instant. In the year 79, a volcano called Vesuvius buried Pompeii under feet of ash and stone. Roofs fell in and walls cracked under the weight. Some houses were being decorated when the disaster hit. One of these is now called the House of the Painters at Work. Inside, archaeologists found pots of paint and unfinished paintings. It looked like the painters had just stepped out for a 10-minute break and never came back. That should have been the end for those beautiful images. Instead, they died a second time, hundreds of years later. When the city was first dug up in the 1700s and 1800s, the walls were left out in the rain and wind. They didn't have the tools we have today to protect them. Weather and small earthquakes damaged surfaces that had just seen the light of day again. But here's the catch. The 20th century was even harder on the art. During World War II, bombs fell on parts of Pompeii and the buildings nearby. These bombs shattered pieces that had already survived the heat of a volcano. One building called the Gladiator School shows just how bad this pattern was. It stood on a main street and was used for training fighters. It lived through the disaster of the year 79 and lasted for nearly 2,000 years. Then, in November of the year 2010, it all came crashing down. After days of heavy rain, the building collapsed before the sun came up. Paintings that had been strong for 2 millennia were suddenly just piles of dirt on the ground. People rushed to save every scrap of plaster they could find, but the damage was already done. Similar stories happened all over the ancient city. In some places, people cut paintings off the walls to try and save them, but they just broke later in storage. This created thousands of fragments that were stripped of their context. All of this material ended up in dark back rooms. Behind the scenes at Pompeii, there are shelves filled with boxes and bags of plaster. One pile alone has thousands of pieces. On paper, the fix is easy. You just clean every piece and look for where it fits. But in real life, that plan fails because there are just too many pieces. A person can maybe remember a few hundred shapes, but once you have thousands, it is impossible. Tiny connections between a red line and a bit of a column are too hard to track. The stakes are very high. The house of the painters at work has scenes from myths and beautiful ceilings. The Gladiator School has images of public shows and fighter life. Experts know these images used to be full and bright. They also know the pieces are still there, but they are just anonymous, broken bits. For years, people had to accept a sad fact. The story was right there, but it was scattered. A few pieces could be put in a museum, but the rest stayed locked in crates. It wasn't like a nice puzzle you buy at a store. It was a mess of volcanic ash, war damage, and modern neglect. Everyone was waiting for something that could make sense of it all. They needed a way to see through the chaos and find the original beauty of the Roman world. It felt like the history of these people was slowly being erased by time itself. The mystery of the broken walls seemed like it would never be solved by human hands alone. Binary logic solving ancient crimes. By the time a piece of plaster reaches the robot, a lot of work has already happened that people don't see. It starts at a simple table. People brush away dirt and look for salt crystals that could eat the paint. They check for old cracks that might open up again. If a shard is too weak, it stays out of the project. The goal is to have pieces that can be handled safely before the digital work begins. This is where things get high-tech. Cameras take photos of every fragment from many angles under special lights. A three-dimensional scanner records how thick the piece is and how its edges curve. Software then turns all of that into a model on a computer screen. Along the painted surface, the computer marks where colors change or where a line stops. All of that becomes data for the AI to study. So here is the deal. Everything goes into a growing database. Instead of just looking at 100 pieces from one wall, the system sees thousands from different buildings. Some pieces show parts of people or borders. Others just look like plain white plaster with a few dots of color. Mixed together, they form a mess that would ruin any normal research project. Human eyes can look at shelves and tables, but they can't remember every single edge. That is why the Repair Project was started in the year 2021. It stands for Reconstructing the Past. It is a place where artificial intelligence and robots meet ancient history. It was started by a university in Venice and funded by the European Union. Many different groups from Italy and Germany helped build the system. They created the matching software and the robot arms that move the real plaster. One of the leaders said the job is like having 5 giant puzzles mixed together with most of the pieces missing. To make it worse, the box lids with the pictures on them are gone. The software starts searching through the digital pile for patterns. It looks for cracks that continue across two edges. It looks for lines that line up perfectly. It even checks if the paint has the same texture and tone. It also looks at the thickness and what the plaster is made of. Each possible match gets a score. The computer doesn't just say yes or no. It says how likely it is that the pieces belong together. On the screen, it doesn't look very exciting. You just see colored shapes and lines. But behind that image, the system is trying combinations that would take a human thousands of years to finish. When the scores for a match are high, the system flags them. The twin-armed robot is the next step. Its grippers are soft, so they don't crush the old plaster. Cameras tell it exactly where the pieces are on the table and how to pick them up. The robot moves carefully to avoid hitting other shards. When the AI suggests a match, the robot lifts the fragment and moves it toward its neighbors. But here is the catch. Nothing is glued together right away. The fits are tested while they are dry. People check if the edges really meet and if the painted lines look right. Sometimes the computer is too hopeful and the match is wrong. When that happens, the piece goes back in its tray and the system tries something else. The real value is that it sifts through an ocean of options and gives the experts the best chances to find the truth. As the robot started to find more matches, the ancient images began to wake up from their long sleep. Faces emerging from the rubble. After months of scanning and matching, something amazing started to happen. Fragments from the House of the Painters and the Gladiator Hall began to lock together in a way that no one could ignore. The database stopped giving just 2 pieces at a time. It started showing big clusters and repeating patterns. People gathered around the monitors to watch. The software was no longer showing just a cloud of shapes. It was showing a large part of a ceiling decoration. It had borders and colored fields and parts of human bodies. The confidence scores on the screen went through the roof. The recommendation was clear. The robot should try to build the whole group. Piece by piece, the metal arms started to move. Fragments that had spent 50 years in different bags were finally meeting each other again. And get this, while some fits failed, most of the high-scoring pieces fell into place perfectly. Thin painted lines met at the right angles. A patch of blue paint connected with a patterned border. The curve of a shoulder finally joined up with the rest of a robe. At a certain point, the image became clear. It no longer looked like a guess. It looked like a real piece of 1,900-year-old art from Pompeii. It was big enough to cover a large part of a wall. For the first time, the team could stand back and see a real scene coming out of the rubble. The idea of AI solving the puzzle was no longer just a dream. It was a physical object lying on the table. This was the moment the project proved it worked. They were repairing art in a way that was never possible before. The people in the room were very quiet. There was a focused silence while they looked at the lines. They were looking for mistakes, but they couldn't find any. Details that had been lost for generations were suddenly there. You could see the tilt of a head and the way a hand was placed. There was a frame that showed where the scene started and ended. What makes this so cool is not just the size, but where it came from. These images lived through a volcano, centuries of being buried, bombs, and buildings falling down. They were broken over and over again. The fact that a robot could put them back together is something most experts never thought they would see. On the table, you can still see the cracks and the missing parts. But it is a real Roman painting. It changes everything we can ask about the rooms it came from. So, here is the deal. The lab is not just fixing pictures. It is changing what we expect from archaeology. Once the art was back together, the focus changed to what the images actually say. The House of the Painters at work was not the biggest house in the city, but the art was very fancy. It had myths and elegant designs. This shows that the people living there cared a lot about how their home looked. When the ceiling comes back together, we can see how the light hit the paint. We can even see the different brush strokes from different workers. It proves that a whole crew of painters worked together on one plan. It is a level of detail we never had before, because we only had tiny scraps. The rebuilt scenes tell a story of a world that was full of life and color before the ash fell, ending the era of lost art. The reconstruction of the Schola Armaturarum, often known as the Gladiator Building, represents one of the most significant triumphs of this new technological era in Pompeii. For decades, this site was a symbol of tragedy. not just because of the ancient eruption of Vesuvius, but because of a modern collapse in 2010 that left its magnificent frescoes in thousands of indistinguishable shards. Now, through the application of robotics and artificial intelligence, the building is offering up its secrets once again. The reconstructed sections have brought back vivid images of military trophies and ornate shields. The very decorations that once lined the hall where Pompeii's fighters gathered to prepare for the games. When these helmets and armor images are digitally and physically restored to their original positions, historians gain a far more intimate view of gladiator life. We often think of these men only in the context of the grand, blood-soaked arena, but the art in this building suggests a more nuanced reality. It wasn't just about the public spectacle of fighting. It was about the private culture they cultivated indoors. The color palette found within these fragments tells a story of its own. The intense reds and deep yellows, characteristic of the Pompeian style, provide clues about the atmosphere of the hall. These colors help researchers determine the building's true purpose, whether it served as a high-status social club for the city's elite fighters or functioned more like a functional military barracks. Having access to these large, coherent panels of art is a massive leap forward. It replaces decades of educated guessing with visual certainty. Furthermore, the human stories associated with the site gain a haunting new dimension when the art is visible. In the very rooms where these beautiful scenes were being painted and maintained, the remains of individuals were found. People who died in the middle of a desperate attempt to flee the falling ash. There is a profound, jarring contrast between the artistic beauty of the walls and the horrific suddenness of the end. When we see the environment they were trying to preserve or escape from, the tragedy feels less like a distant historical event and more like a personal, immediate loss. This project in Pompeii is far more than a local success story. It is a test case for the entire world. The crates of fragments sitting in the storage rooms of Pompeii are merely a small sample of what is currently hidden in museum basements across the globe. Almost every major archaeological dig site struggles with the same overwhelming problem: archaeological purgatory. These institutions hold massive piles of fragments, pottery, fresco, and inscription that no human team has the time, funding, or lifespan to piece together. The methodology being perfected in Pompeii can be exported to any site, regardless of geography or the type of material involved. It doesn't matter if the challenge is a shattered wall painting from Italy or a broken ceremonial vase from an ancient Brioche site in another part of the world. Once a museum creates a digital twin of its fragmented collection, the AI can begin the tireless work of searching for matches. For the global community of scholars, this represents a fundamental shift in perspective. For over a century, thousands of broken bits were viewed as a logistical burden, a mess that would likely never be cleaned up. Today, these same bits are seen as a massive, solvable puzzle. The division of labor is clear and effective. Robots handle the repetitive, boring tasks of high-resolution scanning and physical sorting, while human experts are freed to make the high-level interpretive decisions. This balance ensures that the speed of technology never outpaces the depth of historical understanding. The ethics of digital restoration. As we move into this new frontier, new questions about authenticity and transparency have begun to surface. If a machine is responsible for suggesting how a wall should look, how do we communicate that to the public? It is essential to be honest about the line between original material and a computer-generated hypothesis. This transparency doesn't diminish the value of the work. Rather, it adds a layer of intellectual honesty to the visitor's experience. We must be clear about how these images were recovered and which parts are guesses made by the algorithm based on pattern recognition. The potential for this technology extends far beyond the borders of Italy. If these tools are deployed at major sites across Greece and the Middle East, we could eventually piece together a comprehensive map of the entire ancient world. Questions that were once debated based on a handful of lucky, intact finds can now be addressed using thousands of data points and physical evidence. This is a massive step forward for our collective understanding of human migration, trade, and cultural exchange. We are moving from a snapshot view of history to a high-definition, panoramic understanding of who we are. Perhaps the most significant change brought about by this project is how we define lost history. For a long time, the prevailing wisdom was that once an object was shattered into thousands of pieces, its story was effectively erased. Pompeii is proving that destruction is not permanent. With the right combination of human empathy and machine precision, we can actually reverse the damage of time and neglect. The robots will continue their work, box by box, fragment by fragment. Other museums and governments are watching these developments with intense interest, recognizing that this is not a one-time experiment. It is the first clear signal that the ancient world is not finished talking to us. There are countless stories still trapped in broken plaster and buried debris, and we finally possess the technological key to unlock them. History is no longer a static collection of things that happened in the past. It has become a dynamic, ongoing process of reconstruction. Every match the AI finds and every panel the robot aligns brings us closer to a world we thought was gone forever. We are not just studying the past anymore. We are actively rebuilding it, ensuring that the voices of those who lived 2,000 years ago can finally be heard clearly again. If this technology could rebuild anything from the past, what would you want it to recover next? Does this make you look at museums differently? Subscribe for more and like the video.